introducing yourselves in the chat. I'm Eleanor. Um, I'm so excited that you guys, took time out of your Tuesday nights to come hear about all the incredible work that our chapters are doing all over the country. So yeah, just a reminder for those who didn't hear this early on, but this call is being recorded. There will be captions in English, and we'll send a recording of the call via email to everyone who registered tomorrow morning. Yeah. So again, thanks for being on. Um, and I'm gonna hand it over to Ashik to, talk about like the current political moment that we're in.
All right, thank you, everyone. Welcome to our Solidarity Melts Ice Call with Democratic Socialists of America. I'm Ashik Sadiq, co-chair of DSA, and I'm here today with hundreds of you from all across the country because we are organizing everywhere to power up the mass movement for democracy that we need to overcome ICE. We're in a period right now in the United States where we're seeing masked ICE agents invading our cities, kidnapping our neighbors, and terrorizing our communities, and that is terrifying. But all over the place, workers are fighting back. From rapid response to legislation to students organizing their campuses, DSA members are showing up all over the place to help our communities develop the tools that it will take to beat fascism. And this is a time where, this is only the second month of the year now. Just a few days into the year, we watched in horror as ICE agents murdered Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. And then we saw an all-out siege of the Twin Cities by the occupying force of ICE. Weeks later, they killed Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse. And these killings show how the threat to the livelihoods of immigrants all over the country that we've seen for decades is now openly expanding to target US citizens, very openly. So this is a time where as socialists, we're in DSA, which is the largest socialist organization in the United States in over a century. So we have an analysis of why this is happening. So we remember the words of Martin Luther King Jr., whose holiday we celebrated just last month. And his internationalist vision, his vision of what causes inequality in our society is more crucial than ever. There's a pivotal speech that he gave that's often ignored by, liberal and conservative media and political establishment alike. In his Beyond Vietnam speech, Dr. King said that a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And that was the case then many decades ago, and today the US is in a zombie state. Our government's military budget is now soaring past $1 trillion, and what that military budget has been supporting abroad is now coming back as an imperial boomerang right here in this country. And that's what ICE is. The ICE budget is now ballooning larger than the militaries of most countries, and that's while social services are being cut for millions of working class people. So this is a scary time, but millions of people are waking up to the reality that many of us have known all along. As the existing order keeps decaying, socialism is what can beat fascism. More and more Americans are realizing that abolish ICE is not a radical demand, like many thought it was when people started saying it, when Trump first got elected, or even before that. It's now very clearly a rational response to an out of control force of state terror that's still younger than most DSA members today. It was only created in 2003, so they're college kids or people who just graduated who are older than ICE is. And all across the country, we're showcasing today what DSA members are demonstrating. From coast to coast, there are members who are taking on Trump's deportation machine, participating in ICE Watch programs, exposing the malfeasance of ICE agents, organizing for sanctuary city legislation, and making ICE collaboration a toxic decision for businesses like Avelo Airlines, which we recently won a boycott against because they were contracting with ICE to do deportation flights. Just days after Renee Good's killing, they announced that they're giving up their contracts because it's so toxic at this point. So all of these are why they're part of the reason why DSA is the biggest socialist org in over a century. DSA has more members right now than we ever have. We just passed 99,000 members nationwide, which is our biggest membership milestone yet. If you're not a member of DSA yet, you might be close to becoming our 100,000th member. So if you aren't yet, now's a very good time to join. And this is an organization that's growing all over the place from coast to coast. You might have heard of Zoran Mamdani in New York City, who is probably our most popular member at this point. But all over the place, we're growing. Some of our fastest growing DSA chapters are in places you might not expect. They're in places like Corpus Christi, Texas. They're in Sonoma County, California, in Middle Georgia DSA, Bluegrass DSA in Kentucky. So all over the place, we're growing. We're figuring out how to build power, and I'll just start handing it off to our next speakers, who will showcase why DSA is more powerful today than many of us could have imagined just a decade ago. And we're going to keep organizing everywhere for the world that we know all of us deserve to win. So solidarity, and I will hand it off to Eleanor to introduce our first speaker.
Yeah, I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker who has been a champion of anti-ICE legislation and who, I personally knock doors for to help elect. The next speaker is New York City City Council member Tiffany Caban.
That's super dope. Thank you. What's up, y'all? I'm Councilmember Tiffany Caban out of New York City, specifically Queens. For folks in the other parts of the country, I am one member in a 51 member city council, so we are really, really big. Each of us represent about 200,000 constituents per council district. And I just started my last 4 years, my last term. And I am a very proud DSA endorsed socialist in office. I am an abolitionist. I am a queer woman. I am a born and bred Queens Puerto Rican. I'm somebody who lives with a mental health diagnosis. I'm somebody who lives with a disability and grew up in a working class family. In a union household, which was just a game changer for my family. And it's the intersection of those identities and those experiences that brought me to my abolitionist socialist political ideology and ultimately to DSA. And I just want to name that. It's important, I think, just even for the folks that are thinking about joining and trying to find their place in the world. But yeah, I am, among other things, the prime sponsor of what we passed called the Safer Sanctuary Act. But I kind of want to back up before I talk about that piece of legislation specifically. I'm going to back up until, right after electing Trump 2.0. Before the occupation in Minneapolis, we saw obviously the ramping up of this deportation agenda all over the country and different places and spaces. And we recently kicked out a really fucking awful, corrupt former cop mayor in New York City who was doing former cop fuckery while he was in office and obviously cutting deals with Trump, saving his own butt. And that included buying into the Trump deportation agenda that we've now experienced ramped up to the degree that it has. One of the things that we did experience was there was a willingness to cooperate with ICE, despite the fact that we are a sanctuary city here in New York City. And I'll get into more about what our sanctuary protections look like, what they look like now. But I will say this, even though we were a sanctuary city, we were still under siege in a lot of ways and vulnerable in a lot of different ways. There are lots of different ways to cooperate with a deportation agenda like this to criminalize immigrant communities. The definition of a sanctuary city is that we don't cooperate with ICE, share information with ICE to advance civil immigration enforcement. But the fact of the matter is that the criminalization to immigration to deportation pipeline is very, very real. And so one of the things we saw, for example, was our mayor and the NYPD commissioner changing policies, like saying, hey, we have cyclists in our city. A lot of our cyclists are delivery workers. A lot of those delivery workers are immigrants, and a lot of them are undocumented immigrants. So instead of giving out the civil tickets, the civil enforcement tickets that were typically being given out to people riding their bikes, they said not only are we going to ramp up enforcement of bicycle violations, we are going to use our discretion to issue criminal summonses. Well, that's a way to stop and criminalize a largely undocumented population. And now that's not civil immigration enforcement. These people are exposed to criminal charges, exposed to possible deportation proceedings and removal. So there are lots of ways around it, and we had to be really, really savvy around looking at all the different ways that we could be intersecting and that weren't like the most obvious, but absolutely we're advancing this deportation agenda. Another thing that also was going on at the same time was that there is this law that has been since repealed through the legislation I passed that basically created a mechanism for our mayor under certain circumstances, despite the fact that we are a sanctuary city, to justify and allow ICE agents to set up physical offices in our jails and on our Department of Corrections properties. And he did attempt to do this. And technically he could have, but we sued. The council did. The council sued, and we won, not because they said it was unlawful for that kind of office to exist, but they were just like, homie, we can't trust you. You didn't follow the proper protocol. You didn't create enough of a wall of separation, and the appearance of essentially corruption was too great, and so we're throwing this out. That was a victory, of course, but it still meant that another mayor could decide to do the same. So immediately when this lawsuit was filed, I also put in to start drafting the Safer Sanctuary Act, which is a law that expanded our sanctuary city protections that had been updated. And I'll give you a little bit of the background on our sanctuary city laws. But essentially, prior to 2014, the Department of Corrections was funneling immigrant New Yorkers on Rikers Island into ICE detention. And so in 2014, after a ton of advocacy, the city council passed legislation that limited when DOC could collude with ICE and banned them from having these offices on Rikers Island. So that's what I was talking about before, that last year, through an executive order, the mayor sought to collude with the federal administration's mass deportation agenda by seeking to return them to this office. So we also use this opportunity to not just repeal that law that allows for such an executive order to be put in place, but we were like, hey, this is an opportunity to work with our partners. We specifically worked with the New York Immigration Coalition, with the Immigrant Defense Project, NYCLU, the Legal Aid Society, and I'm sure in your cities and municipalities you have similar organizations that are doing immigration work to varying degrees. And we said, hey, how can we make these laws stronger? We know, first of all, that part of this work was always going to be a narrative work. I mean, this is, again, before we saw some of the appalling things that we have seen coming out of Minneapolis and other places. And so people still need to be convinced, some. Like, hard to believe, but yes, some people needed to be convinced. And so we did a lot of talking about how actually sanctuary cities are, in fact, safer per capita than non-sanctuary cities, that actually there was less crime in sanctuary cities. And the reason for that was obviously that when you drive people underground, they don't seek access to healthcare. They don't seek access to public safety officials. They become more vulnerable to being harmed or victims of harm themselves. They don't go to work. It depresses the economy. Like all of these things that create the conditions for violence and harm and quote unquote crime. And so those were some of the conversations we had. But this was an expansion that was the largest expansion that we saw to our sanctuary city law in over a decade. Now I'm going to get really, really wonky with you for a second to talk about this legislation. So bear with me, because I want to walk you through sort of what the elements of this was. And we had to introduce it. We had to get enough co-sponsors, which we were able to do pretty quickly, despite being a 51-person body. There was a strong consensus around having these protections in place in this political environment against a Trump administration. But it repealed that law that made it so that no ICE shop could be set up on any Department of Corrections property anywhere in the city of New York. And then the big thing and the thing that I'm probably the most proud of that we worked with our organizing partners with was updating the definition of immigration enforcement and immigration authorities. So like those two very distinct and clear terms that have legal meanings, immigration enforcement and immigration authorities, so that city employees were then restricted from participating in or colluding with federal agencies in the following areas. Before I go into the areas, the reason why this is important is because I'll give you an example. Like we had this really big, it was covered, televised raid on Canal Street of, West African men who sell their wares on Canal Street. And you didn't just have ICE agents out there. You had motherfuckers with, IRS vests and FBI vests. And so we're seeing all of these other federal agencies be deputized to do this really violent deportation work. So it updates those definitions by doing the following. It says that enforcement of any civil provisions of the Immigration and Nationality Act, so the INA, that penalizes people for being found in, having failed to depart from, entry into, or re-entry into the United States, and enforcement of any provision of federal law that penalizes conduct related to the registration, travel document, or supervision requirements contained in the Immigration and Nationality Act, that INA, and enforcement of any provision of federal law which the mayor has determined is being used by federal immigration authorities as a proxy for civil immigration enforcement. And so it also gave some extra powers to our mayor, which, we're always careful about what that looks like and how we do it, to say, hey, we can kind of look around and sort of make the judgment call that actually there are these provisions that it isn't civil, as much as they want to say it's civil immigration enforcement, it's actually something else, and we're not going to let that happen. So that's the law. We passed it. We got a supermajority on it pretty quickly. It was one of the last bills we passed last year, and then our former corrupt mayor decided that he was going to veto it along with almost 24 other progressive, really important bills that we had passed. So we just recently overrode that bill. We have the support of our new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, on that bill, and we've been working closely. So that's, I can do you one better, Monica. I'm going to put I'll put like a little explainer doc in the chat for you guys. It's a little bit easier to navigate. So that's the law. That's what it does. And I think it was really important in terms of being able to meet the moment. But I'm also going to say this too. I'm a lawyer. The thing that I did before I was a city council member, I was a public defender. I was representing people in court. I was representing oftentimes immigrants. And the law so many times is bullshit, right? Like, we are taught to believe that the law is this like sacred, immovable thing. It's apolitical, and that just simply isn't true. The law is a political tool like everything else in our government and organized society. And right now it is being wielded by white nationalist bigots to harm our communities. And one, we don't have to abide by that law, but two, it makes it also clear that we can use and manipulate the law to beat that back and win, and that it has to be one of many tools that we use on an everyday basis. And so I know that my role here was to talk to you about some of the legislative work that we're doing. And please, I'll also put in my office's email address, because if you know council members in other cities that want to look at our language and introduce similar legislation, we're happy to share that with y'all, as well as, communication support and things like that. But this isn't all we're doing. And I know other people are going to talk about that stuff too. Like, we're trying to do it all. Me and my colleagues and our community members and comrades, we're engaging in civil disobedience. We were at 26 Federal Plaza not that long ago, and we used our bodies to block the driveways where the ICE trucks, will haul people in and out from court when they try to detain and disappear them from there. We're doing community defense work. We have the organization Ice Out NYC, and our neighbors are getting trained in how to provide care. We're telling families how to do their safety planning, and all of those kinds of things. We're doing court accompaniments because simply being present and bearing witness means that we've got a better shot at tracking people, getting their information. That then means that we can get a lawyer to file writs of habeas corpus to try to get them released on a bond. We are trying to do everything we possibly can in this moment. So this is just one strategy of many. So I think I've yammered on enough, unless folks have questions specifically about the legislation or the process for getting it introduced and passed. Please, I'm happy, but if not, I'll hand it back over to the MC.
Um, yeah. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was incredible. And thank you not only for being on, but like for continuing to be an organizer while in office. That's like, exactly what electing socialist to office is all about. So that was awesome. So our next speaker is going to be the Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union, an incredible union that's been doing a lot of really important, rapid response work, and lots of other kind of work. So take it away, Jackson.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thanks for having me. A big fan of DSA, and I'm gonna explain a little bit about sort of how we got here in Chicago in terms of our sanctuary schools, our rapid response networks, and sort of the outpouring of popular support for working families, Black and brown, immigrant, and documented who have been, traumatized by a lot of the influx of these federal agents. It's important to start with how we were able to build some infrastructure prior to Trump Part 2. It was in 2019 that the CTU went on an 11-day strike. It's where, for the first time ever in our history, we were able to put sanctuary school language into our contract. And it really set a foundation to ensure no agents could come into buildings without a signed judicial warrant. It required training, around school staff protecting undocumented students. It provided legal support and a whole variety of provisions that fortified the protection for our most vulnerable families. And the practical implications were it prepared us for this moment. Nothing can quite fully get you ready, but we were not starting at zero. And it also is important to note this was before the Trump administration removed protections for sensitive sites. So we didn't know that was something that might be about to happen. And so these protections, are only as good as what this, lawless administration is willing to pursue. So this language has been adopted and innovated upon. The United Teachers of Los Angeles took it and ran, and they've got walking school buses now that they have established with their district that we are trying to now enact in ours. The St. Paul Federation of Educators will tell you that they borrowed heavily from our mutual aid and training tools. We were able to force the district to do district-wide training that we had, developed with community organizations and networks. The Illinois Coalition of Immigrant Refugee Rights has been really central in helping, thousands of Chicagoans understand what it is to do ICE Watch, how to provide help and support for families that are being targeted by ICE, what to do to record and document, how to seek legal support and assistance. So they trained us. We adapted that training to school leaders and then required the district to work with everyone. And so now it's a mandatory training that everyone takes if you're an employee of the Chicago Public Schools. So these were things, that got adopted in different parts of the country as a result. And then SPFE recently trained up 2,000 parents. They have a mutual aid network in response to the particularly virulent and nasty, attacks they're facing in Minneapolis. That we're going to probably have to adopt soon and has gone beyond what we've been able to accomplish so far. So, just to give you a little sense of what's happened in Chicago, we were at the eye of the storm in September when Bovino came to town with Border Patrol, and you had an influx of ICE agents, and they called it Operation Midway Blitz. They hit a school before that, actually, to sort of test the ground in January of 2025, where a Secret Service agent attempted to seize a 10-year-old. They said they had posted something anti-Trump on their social media. So we were able to block them from entry. That was kind of the first structure test of these new provisions. And then September 12th of this year, the 2025, Silverio Gonzalez was murdered. We also often have been talking about Pretty and Good, and it's important to note you have Kevin Porter Jr., you have Silverio, who were also killed, and black and brown people by ICE for no good reason, in cold blood. And in Silverio's case, as he was trying to drop his child at school. So really outrageous examples. In September 30th, they take helicopters and rappel down 300 agents into a predominantly black part of Chicago and are zip tying children and families, documented, undocumented alike, hauling them out at 3 in the morning because somebody called in. It turns out a bad landlord, a slumlord, that there were undocumented Venezuelans living in the building. And they total disregard for civil liberties. October 3rd, they pepper spray children who are in recess because somebody's blocking one of their cars with a bicycle. And there had to be emergency protection and walking those children home and getting them Ubers to make sure they were safe. On October 9th, these agents were chokeholding parents who were in the queue to pick up their kids after school at one neighborhood. In October 19th, in my neighborhood, they shot a woman, a young lady, 7 times because, she was tracking their activity, and they rammed her and claimed she had provoked this incident. All the evidence shows they're lying about everything. Then they went after a pre-K teacher on November 5th and hauled her out of her classroom. They had to release her later, but that was the next outrage. And so this is just kind of to encapsulate how Chicago is experiencing this moment. And we had very thick relations, growing rapid response networks, a real outpouring of sentiment. Just last week, 600 people were trained on a Saturday at a school on the Northwest side. It spurred the resistance we're seeing nationally and, somewhat gave a signal of what to expect. But I don't think any of us realized how terrible it would get in Minneapolis. It's exponentially worse. And they've promised to come back to Chicago. I imagine New York, it's only a matter of time. LA, that we'll all be seeing our own version of this, even if it's Homan and not Bovino. Minneapolis, had a solidarity school in October where they were doing some Mayday Strong coordination among teachers and SEIU Local 26 airport and security workers and laborers and Isaiah, the clergy groups and community orgs and rapid response orgs. And they made some commitments around red lines in October. So it's important to note that January 23rd and kind of the general strike conditions, if you could call a one-day work stoppage a general strike, that was months in the making. People had already anticipated something was going to happen, and they were getting ready. And they've shown us the path, that it requires clarity around what we won't tolerate, creativity on how we come together on a work day through mass trainings. Teachers took mental health days, they did art builds, There were labor management agreements. There were field trips, sick days, 0 days, professional development days. The options were varied and diverse to allow and enable the maximum number of people to participate. So it's a very, you know, strategic manner in which they organize this. And so that cuts against a little bit of the mythology around general strikes. General strikes come out of a great tradition of freedom fighters. Think about, the African Americans that broke the back of the Confederacy and eradicated slavery by removing themselves from plantations and going to the lines of the Union to support the war effort that led to the greatest expansion of political and economic rights in this nation's history. I think about my own town, 1886, when workers in Haymarket, May 1st, despite horrendous state violence, were fighting for something bigger than themselves or their local or their city. And an 8-hour day for all workers across the country, literally sacrificing their lives for the common good. But these are counter to the romanticization. It wasn't all workers in all workplaces because somebody, made the call. There were structure tests or there were incidents that spurred that momentum and grew. And so I think there is a combination of structure-based organizing and momentum that is combining in this moment that we haven't seen in a while, but we're going to have to be very, careful in how we're thinking about it to ensure the maximum participation. So, like, often there are chokeholds in the economy that allow and unlock more participation. You saw it in 1877 with railroad workers, 1919 in steel, 1934 in trucking, the Flint sit-down strike in auto. So we have the power, but it does require some intentionality. So this moment, Mayday Strong is calling for Mayday as a structure test. We're going to ask in Chicago that our mayor and our first elected Board of Education work with us so that May 1st is the biggest day of no work, no shopping, no school in U.S. history. Because, when they start arresting black journalists indiscriminately, terrorizing 5-year-olds, killing, citizens, non-citizens alike because they're exercising First Amendment rights, how long do we have to go before we say it's enough? So, I want to encourage us. DSA is part of the May Day Strong network. They're going to try to invalidate the November elections. We see, this federalization of the state-based electoral process as the first step. What they did in Georgia over the weekend. They're going to arrest labor leaders. They're going to attempt to impose martial law. They will inflict more war crimes across the planet. They will push to dismantle public schools. They did a presser with a right-wing influencer over the weekend that said just that. And so the remnants of public accommodation in their path is one of our greatest protections but most vulnerable assets. And we can't let them have it. So, I'm hoping we kind of use this moment to also pivot and rearrange and shift some of the rapid response defense work into the offense. How do we occupy these corporations, their stores, their showrooms, if they're participating with the regime in our oppression? And how do we shut them down? So I think that tried and true methodology that unions have taken when they get, majority support for something as serious, considered, and important, but risky as a strike. We have to apply some of those same rules and methods to social strikes as well. We saw it in the Montgomery bus boycott. That didn't happen overnight. It was tested. It was thoroughly analyzed, and then implemented once the hypothesis was proven correct. So I'm in this with you. I appreciate the time and really appreciate the opportunity to continue chopping this up and figuring out how we're going to get bigger, stronger, and more victorious together and win the things workers need to fight the billionaires and get healthcare, human rights, childcare, education, for free, affordable housing for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackson. Yeah, next up we have an organizer from DSA LA, Thomas. Take it away.
Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks for all the speakers that have gone so far. Just a small introduction for myself. My name is Thomas, as Eleanor mentioned here. I'm from DSA, specifically the San Fernando Valley branch. Los Angeles and Southern California itself is big enough where there's multiple branches within LA. There's five, let alone in Los Angeles itself. Doesn't include Long Beach, doesn't include San Diego, and it doesn't include the Orange County. I've been a DSA member since June of last year, but I've been participating within this Home Depot patrol effort since July, about mid-July, pretty soon after the big bullshit bill was passed in the House. And that pretty much heavily motivated me to get on the ground and start finding some way to help in my community and find some way to make sure that my fellow LAans, Los Angeles, can feel safe. So as you're probably aware, the vast majority of people that are booked by ICE have no criminal records. As you're probably aware, they raid workers, just trying to assert their First Amendment to find public work in public spaces. They um, they attack parents, they attack children, they attack breadwinners, and pretty often as of late, they've been attacking random people on the street as well, pretty heavily because our patrol efforts are primarily focused on Home Depots, and because ICE and Border Patrol have found that we are there in those particular areas very regularly, they find more of a reason to go after people in the streets. Often, again, coming out of nowhere and essentially targeting and aiming at fear. We know that US citizens are also regularly detained, often quote unquote by mistake. We know that the agents operate masked, unmarked, and unaccountable. And we know that very, very, very often raids themselves are dangerous, chaotic, and aimed at fear, not safety. So, next slide. What I have here is a presentation deck essentially aimed at getting you aware of what exactly a community defense patrol does. As I mentioned, this Home Depot effort has been going on since June of last year, in particular, at the very least, for all the branches within LA, as well as Orange County and Long Beach and San Diego, as I mentioned before. These are all patrols targeted at making our communities feel safe. Now, again, since we've been running them since June, a lot of these community members, a lot of the jornaleros, a lot of the street vendors, they are aware of where we are and what we're doing and why we're there to do it. I'm very sure that if many of you are interested in starting your own patrols in your own areas, that these are relationships that you will have to build from scratch potentially. But do not fear, because very often there are already community organizations in your area, and it's a matter of finding them, letting them understand what you're trying to do, where you're trying to help, and what you can do in order to start building those relationships, often not from scratch itself. So while I point out on here that a lot of the work that we're doing here on these patrols are often much more than the reactionary work that you'll often see in social media, there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of proactive organizing effort that is critical for making sure, again, that our communities not only feel safe, that they are protected, but more importantly, that we can unite with them in safety and in solidarity. So what I have on here provides essentially the bulk summary of that effort: building relationships, informing people of the rights so that they know how they can assert them and the ways that they contribute to the work, alerting community presence of ICE, and then documenting kidnappings and collecting evidence. What the summary doesn't include are the other mutual aid efforts that San Fernando Valley Ranch, just as an example, has started and been doing, and that do very often end up contributing to your ability to connect to these communities and ensure that they see that you are trying to do something that helps them. So parts of that include care packages with red Know Your Rights cards, There's a site that we've been utilizing relatively often, I think called Red Card Orders or Red Cards Online. You can get these. They have the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the Fifth Amendment. First Amendment, again, about ensuring that you can seek work in public places. The Fourth Amendment about um, prohibiting unreasonable searches and seizures, including use of force. And the Fifth Amendment, that everyone has the right to remain silent, that does not answer questions. Everyone has the right to due process, including legal counsel, and everyone has the right to non-punitive conditions of confinement. It lists all these out. You can get one side in English and one side in a vast majority of a vast swath of different languages. Spanish is pretty often one that we utilize within Los Angeles. But I know that there are many other options as far as languages go, and those help as far as, again, things being able to start conversations with people and things about materials that they can have on person so that they can help to start formulate a plan of what to do if ICE comes, if ICE is in the area. Um, Mentioned the care packages. This also does include the post-raid care for families affected by raids. Very often when raids occur, they pretty much try and do like Metal Gear Solid, in and out as quickly and as quietly as possible. Um, uh, and so they don't like when patrols are in the area. But more specific to this point, because they try and get in and get out as quickly as possible, people that are kidnapped are often left with their personal possessions essentially left where they were. So they could have cars that they own that are just left behind. They could have personal items. They obviously could have, and often do have, families that have no idea that they have been kidnapped, that they have been captured. And so pretty often what our patrol work is also doing is making sure that we have access to their emergency contacts. So if we do witness and document anyone that is kidnapped, they now have a person on the outside that not only knows who they are, they can start to do the work as far as finding out what detention center they're put into. We can start doing the work as far as finding out where, if they need medication, to get medication sent. We can start figuring out how to start up a GoFundMe and work with other organizations like Endelon, National Day Laborer Organizing Network, in order to start to get them free and to get them well sought after. This doesn't include the food distribution for families that are very often unable to leave their homes for fear of ICE. This doesn't include communicating with your communities, the daily bolos, what we call as Beyond the Lookouts, hosted by Harbor Area Peace Patrol online. They are a volunteer group that daily tracks Terminal Island, and will post out, again, on a daily basis, those known ICE vehicles that are leaving Terminal Island on a daily basis. And this is so far so that we can then alert our communities about the vehicles to look out for, about the license plates to look out for, pretty often about the vehicles, because what we'll often find is that these vehicles do not have license plates. Or they have the same license plates matched across 6 vehicles, or they have out of country license plates. There's a lot of fuckery that goes on with that group. But Harbor Area Peace Patrol is, again, a local community, a local group that is volunteering their time, and through this united solidarity effort, making sure that we can help and protect our communities. And probably the last one that I'll mention, again, not on here, is canvassing to local businesses, essentially so that they can know how to protect their clients and their employees in the case of an ICE raid. I often haven't seen and said that this is one of the easiest canvassing topics ever, which is literally just letting people, letting businesses, letting communities know their constitutional rights they have, so that they can form a plan on what to do. Because very often you go into these places, you'll explain why you're here, you'll explain that this is entirely free information, and they'll either be like, I had no idea, and thank you so much for helping me out here, or I thought they might come, I thought they might not come, and it's wonderful that you're offering this information here for me to not only be able to help myself, help my clients, help my employees, but help the community too. It's a very strong unity effort that sort of brings on in there. So next slide. So in broad summary, a community defense patrol is nonviolent and is more specifically showing solidarity and unity with our communities, not just for the community's protection and safety, but also with the community's protection and safety. Um, Next slide. So again, sort of broad summary to this point. These are things that, so for our patrol work, we've very frequently been starting from 6 in the morning and running till around noon. And more often than not, and especially more often than late, running even later in the day as we have more volunteers and patrollers that are trained for this effort to get involved with. Um, and as you can expect, the vast majority of your time, ICE is not present. So you might be asking yourself, what can I do while on these patrols to still help with this effort, even when ICE is not present? And in of itself, it's pretty easy. And I say easy, only having been doing this nearly every week since July. But it's talk. It's talk and it's collaborate. And I know that can sound difficult, but it very much is not. It just takes getting started. Um, and this is street vendors, this is jornaleros, this is Spanish for day laborers, if you're unaware. This is local businesses, this is community resource centers. You know, as a first benchmark, you can make sure that they're informed of their legal rights, prepared to safeguard their workers from ICE raids and aware of your presence. As a second communication, if you have care packages, if you have water bottles, if you have documentation, which I'll also make sure that we include the link for documentation that we've been using in Los Angeles, um, then that's another great way to spark conversation. See if they're interested in building isolate chats. As I already mentioned, the daily bolos that get sent out are a wonderful way to help communities at least know what to look out for, and also make them feel informed so that they can make their own decisions about what they will choose to do for that day. One of the things that I have seen is that even the day after raids, where ICE was there, where ICE might have kidnapped someone, where ICE was very active, even hours after that has occurred, you might still get day laborers showing up in that area. And that's because, again, this is their First Amendment right. They're looking for work. They're trying to just, you know, live. Um, and so what we can do here is make sure that they are informed to be able to make their own decisions, to have the united understanding of how to live their lives. So the last part on there is just that language is not the barrier you might think it is. Google Translate is great for just being able to get over the hump. And you will be surprised how much of Spanish or English that the other person often knows, when you just strike up a conversation. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there are very often other organizations doing work within your area. PSL and DSA are fantastic ways to, at the very least, look out. So find the chapters in your area that are doing something, and then find their posts, and then find out what other groups are liking their posts. The examples that we have that I put on here towards the end of the slide, People Struggle San Fernando Valley is the hotline network, the rapid response network within San Fernando Valley that we have been recommended to call in the case of not only ICE sightings, but of course ICE raids. They take texts, they take calls. And again, Rapid Response Network, if you're unaware, is a network of volunteers within a specific community that will react to ICE sightings, to ICE raids, and get on the ground out of their own time and effort and gas and do something. Valley Defensa is a great one as well within that same vein for the Valley. CSDC is the Community Self-Defense Coalition, which is a very strong rapid response network within Los Angeles as a whole. And as I had already mentioned, the Harbor Peace Patrols is another fantastic group also volunteering within this whole effort. So the collaboration could be just going to their events, It could just be networking with their individuals, both online and offline. It could be offering mutual aid. The list that I mentioned earlier are all fantastic things to start if you aren't doing them. Um, and then all these organizations will often will often run their own defense trainings, essentially what to do on patrol, what are other non-violent actions that you can take, and those sorts of trainings. So the next slide is actually going to also now give you the link for our DSA LA Community Ice Watch Patrol trainings. Um, the QR code here leads to DSA.LA/patrol. This is going to link to the Fighting Fascism Committee's events for the DSA LA calendar. Like I mentioned, every week, pretty often has been on Mondays. We run a hour and a half Zoom training that goes over all of what I already mentioned, but in even more detail. Um, and even if you aren't within Los Angeles, all of that information is entirely applicable to whatever area you're coming from. We often get veterans, essentially people that have gone through trainings, people that have gone through raids, people that have trained in other organizations to return to these trainings as well. So often, if you have a question that might not have got answered on one training, or have a question that you just have out of the blue, you can ask it in the chat, and very often see it answered in real time. Because these are people that are very committed to this effort, very committed to their communities, and it is a very strong, solid effort that we do together to help each other. The link that I have, the QR code that's on the right there as well, leads to additional resources, additional documentation that covers more than what I covered here. But that is also there for your purview and for your help. Probably the last thing that I'll say on here is that, everyone, like I mentioned, everyone involved in this effort is volunteering their own time to do so, and often started, like many of you, fresh, motivated to help and not sure how or where to get started. Know that every program, mutual aid effort, rapid response network, and community event has an origin in at least one or two of you wanting to build hope from despair, build something from nothing. So I recommend you to do what's in your limit, to talk to one another, to share your ideas, thoughts, comments, and concerns with your community. There's no ceiling to what we can build, and every little bit makes all of us safer going forward. This is how we raise the floor for all of us. So with that, I'll give it back to Eleanor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was incredibly informative. And absolutely agree that, if you're on this call and you're like, how do I get started? You've already started. So, even just wanting to get involved, that's the first step. And next up, we have Anna from the University of Minnesota, YDSA. Um, you know, uh, oh, there we go. All right. Thank you, Anna, for being on.
Yeah, hey, what's up, everybody? I'm gonna be brief. I'm just gonna talk mainly about YDSA and the Sanctuary Campus campaigns that are going on across the country, and specifically ours here locally in Duluth, and within the University of Minnesota Duluth. So Sanctuary Campus campaigns are a priority campaign of YDSA, Young Democratic Socialists of America, across the country, and dozens of campuses across the country are fighting to achieve these. Basically, the sort of general description of a sanctuary campus is just non-compliance with ICE, but the specific three demands that generally chapters look for that sort of most ensure the protection of immigrant students and such is non-disclosure of student immigrant information to immigration authorities from the school administrations, allowing not allowing the school to share whether a student is documented, whether they're immigrant or not, things of that nature. This is kind of an obvious thing for, their personal protection. Another thing is to prohibit campus police, school police from acting as immigration enforcement, not letting campus police arrest students on immigration matters, question their immigration status, and things of that nature, as well as just blanket not allowing ICE on campus without having a judicially signed warrant, right? And yeah, I hope I don't need to explain that. ICE is murdering people, it's kidnapping people, it's a danger to our community and students to allow them to step foot on campus. So there are difficulties with these mainly because university administrations across the country are very afraid of Trump crackdowns, of withdrawing funding, of the national administration punishing universities for not working with ICE, and that's generally one of the main reasons why oftentimes administrations choose inaction instead of protecting their students. And that is why these campaigns exist by YDSA and Students for Justice in Palestine. It's a shared priority between YDSA and SJP. So basically, I'm going to share like our own campaign timeline here at TMD and how we, have tried to pressure our administration to care for its students. And I think apparently we're one of the most successful campuses across the country. I'm not sure what that says, but we are a small town. I think that's another thing to consider. A lot of our previous speakers were from very big cities, so maybe this is not going to be quite as grand. And ICE in Duluth is not as large of a problem currently as they have been in like the cities and other places. And in fact, like we in many ways are currently like getting ready for the wave of ICE that's probably coming to Duluth or is in the process of coming to Duluth. So we started all of this back in April 3rd of 2025, which was a national day of action for YDSA about sanctuary campuses. Our campus had, hundreds of students rallying on campus, calling on our administration to implement these changes, to meet with student representatives and, discuss implementing these demands. Not much came of that one. I think it's important also to know that we are part of a university system, and the president of the University of Minnesota system has been one of the least, how do I say this, has been one of the least pro. Then coming into 2025, we have continued to collect signatures on a petition. I'm just sorry, I'm just checking whether my internet is working or not. I'm really sorry. But yes, we continued during the elections. We also have put forward a resolution to our student government to pass calling on the administration to fulfill these previously set demands. And that is another, like, student governments are oftentimes extremely powerless and just theatrics. However, I think on paper, at least, having the official voice of the student body, standing up for students about an administration that's neglecting also be pressure tool. And I think it depends a lot on how hard it is to organize in students' government. So I'm not necessarily suggesting this for every single campus out there. Ours was easy to push our resolution through. I'm sure in more conservative places, there's going to be more conservative student governments, at which point maybe it's not worth it to try to pressure them in any ways. But yeah, our main action was in December of last year when we had a sit-in occupying the main student center on campus for a week, which also got the university administration to be willing to meet with our leadership and discuss these demands and discuss uh, how to stand up for students. So I think in terms of how we ran this as a campaign, I think one of our biggest strength was just like people really want to do stuff, like the right now is a very scary time in the world. DSA was basically the one place on campus that was doing anything was enough for us to get, tons of people participating, coming to protests, coming to general meetings, and developing that bench of organizers is one very important thing to focus on. Why DSA has gotten a lot bigger and a lot more diverse, also thanks to our campaign and thanks to people just seeing that there are people out there who are willing to do stuff. But yeah, in terms of the administration at UMD, have agreed to work together with certain student leaders, which is essentially all just YDSA people, about creating protocols about like protection. And that has sort of been a victory just in terms of publicly, the administration does not want to seem oppositional to student safety. And as a result of that, it's kind of hard to have as much like public pressure on the admin. ICE can still come on campus, and generally the administration is always like slow rolling and leaning towards inaction more than anything. So one important thing that we've been doing, and I believe is important for other campuses as well, is we've been practicing a lot of ICE Watch on campus. We have connected in with our neighborhood rapid response group. We have one for just campus and our surrounding neighborhoods. And there's been a lot of collaboration between the students and just the people in the neighborhood. This also allows us a way to reach out to like working class youth who are not in university, because obviously university is very much gate kept from a lot of people who still need youth organizing and need to be taken care of. So yeah, I think just not having pressure on university administrations is important. It's also important for us to like organize to protect ourselves directly. So yeah, check.
Thank you so much, Anna. And our final speaker tonight is going to be Marina, talking about working against flock cameras.
Hi, y'all. My name is Marina. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an organizer with Austin DSA in Texas. And I guess just sort of my opening question is, how do you find someone who doesn't want to be found? As our undocumented neighbors are hiding in their homes, afraid to leave, even to buy groceries or pick up their children. And I think for us, one of the answers to that question in this case is mass surveillance. So, with last summer's spending bill increasing ICE's budget to a historic high of nearly $30 billion, ICE has been able to acquire all of these new toys that grant them essentially unfettered access to our information. So, I'm kind of just diving right in here, but um, whenever we think about the tools that ICE has at their disposal, there is a way for us to organize around weakening their power and weakening their ability to hunt down our neighbors. So there's this app as one example called Mobile Fortify, and it allows ICE to identify people using a combination of facial recognition technology and layered data sets that they acquire from companies like Flock and LiveView, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The app provides ICE agents with your name, the names of your family members, possible citizenship information that may or may not be accurate, and more. So ICE agents use Mobile Fortify to assess a person's immigration status on the spot. As far as they're concerned, if the app identifies you as undocumented, then you are. They've arrested people convicted by the app even when they were able to produce a birth certificate. So this is kind of the part of the mass surveillance infrastructure that we're up against, right? And I'm going to kind of pause there and jump to the formation of a coalition here in Austin called the No ALPRs Coalition. So there are these tech companies, and some of our allies at the Electronic Frontier Foundation have explained to me if you're a tech company, there are two possible profit models for you. Either you rent hardware or you are the broker of data sets, right? Like you sell data. You buy, you harvest people's data and then you sell it to the highest bidder. Um, the thing about that is that if you're okay, if that's your profit model, if you're that type of corporation, it's your express preference not to have to obtain the informed consent of the people whose data you're brokering, right? So, you know, if we're talking about throwing sand in the gears of the deportation, the mass deportation machine, this actually provides, campaigns targeting automated license plate readers or the sort of the companies that furnish ICE with these data sets gives us a material way to mess up the tools that they have, right? Like we're basically weakening the infrastructure that they rely on in order to facilitate mass deportations. So the No ALPRs Coalition formed in order to combat automated license plate readers in our city. And automated license plate readers are basically cameras that are on infrastructure like cop cars or light poles and things around town. And rather than just taking a snapshot of your license plate and putting just that data somewhere, they're actually taking photos and sometimes video footage of you as you pass by. Whenever you layer that with facial recognition technology, things like a law here in Texas that criminalizes giving a ride consensually to an undocumented person becomes a lot easier to prosecute, right? Because they can just find out who's in your car at all times. Um, so this is obviously a huge invasion of privacy. We start this fight last year to end the ALPR pilot program in our town. We mobilized over 35 organizations to join this coalition to combat ALPRs. And we set out with a goal of not just preventing ALPRs from returning, but of building organizers. And, like trying to shift the culture around AI surveillance in Austin, which is pretty famously a tech town here in Central Texas. We managed to win labor support. We've got unions who have signed on. We moved the Central Labor Council, which is a body that represents a lot of unions, in particular trade unions here in Austin. And we've managed to cover a lot of different issues in addition to ALPRs now. But what this meant was we were really well positioned to talk about and really be a leader on anti-ICE work in Austin from the perspective of giving people a way to fight ICE. That's a little novel because I think if we're taking on an entity as powerful as ICE, that we know now has a budget bigger than a lot of countries' like entire government budgets, we are going to need a variety of tactics. We're going to need to train organizers. We're going to need to do ICE Watch. We're going to need to do policy work. But I think it's also just how do we hit at the power that they have? How do we strike at that? So I want to back up for a minute and just sort of talk more broadly about like why fight mass surveillance and how does this connect to fighting ICE? Mass surveillance is the single most indicative trait of tyrannical regimes. throughout history, we know mass surveillance has played a pivotal role in the ability of a tyrannical regime to maintain power. Um, we also know today there is this tech to deportation pipeline where there are all of these different kinds of technologies that feed into ICE's power and ICE's ability to facilitate the mass deportation agenda. So, like I said, it's about making mass deportations more expensive. It's about making the work that ICE is trying to do harder. But the good news is this is really intersectional, right? And I think that's an advantage. That's an advantage in any organizing work that we ever want to do because it allows us to build bigger, stronger coalitions. So there are reproductive justice intersections. There was a cop in Johnson County that searched ALPR data looking for a woman who allegedly self-managed an abortion. I would encourage you to look that up. There's a Palestine intersection because Palestinian liberation organizers are being targeted with this technology as well. Um, this intersects with the right to protest, with climate justice because AI is powered by data centers, which deplete our natural resources. So, it also allows us, and I think this is really critical for DSA organizers, to organize on class lines, not party lines. Monday, I'm doing something kind of weird and new for me, and I'm going to go talk to a group of libertarians about this issue. That is really critical here in Texas because if we're going to fight at the state level, then we have to build coalitions that are not limited to people who identify as Democrats right now. I think that your organizing circles should be limited to people who share values, but the people that you reach with your messaging should be broader than that, right? And so that's what we're testing out here. I also think it's important because it's an easy organizing ask, right? People understand on some level that they're being surveilled by their phones, by their electric cars, by their doorbell cameras. They just don't think there's anything they can do about it. And a campaign like this weaves fighting ICE, which is something I think a lot of us are really desperate to do right now, with the chance to win back some of our own freedom, right? It builds power. Privacy impacts everybody. I guess I'll circle back to that. What we've accomplished in this coalition is we've ended the ALPR pilot program here. That was the biggest upset for Flock that took place last year. We blocked live view AI cameras in parks and pools. We blocked a proposal that would have made an AI predictive model to anticipate when Austinites were going to become homeless. We blocked AI, ALPRs and AI surveillance across Central Texas, in San Marcos, in Lockhart, in Hays County, in Sunset Valley. We've built new organizers. We've built new infrastructure for organizing, new formations of power, and we're shifting the culture around AI surveillance. And now we're able to channel that energy into fighting ICE. And we're thinking that we're probably just going to roll this campaign into Austin DSA's anti-ICE campaign. I want to share a couple of tools in the chat. I want to share the No ALPR's website just so people can look at how we're messaging this and follow us on social media if you want to. I also want to share the DFlock app. This is basically an app that allows people to, if you see a flock camera out in the wild, you can mark that location, and that helps us as organizers track them and know where they're at. This could be really critical for undocumented people or anybody who doesn't want to be located by ICE because they can use that tool in order to create a route to work that doesn't, cross paths with an ALPR. And then lastly, I want to share ALPR Watch, which is a website that one of our allies created to basically it will let you know anytime your municipal city council or your municipal government is looking at a flock contract. If you don't already have AI mass surveillance in your community, they will take a shot at your community eventually, and it's better to be ready. So, that's just another tool that you guys can have at your disposal. Sorry, I'm pausing here because I don't know. I just want to make sure that I'm on time here. I want to talk briefly about some of the strategic advantages of anti-surveillance organizing. Um, because I think everybody here probably already understands, yeah, we want to fight ICE, we want to weaken them. Marina doesn't need to explain this to you. But I think that this is a good campaign to launch, to have in your DSA chapter's arsenal of anti-ICE activity, because you have some of the best corporate opponents that an organizer could ask for. They are villainous. They're so careless with everybody's data. They lie all the time. They break the law. If you look up news stories in journalism about Flock, you're just going to have a treasure trove of stuff to run away with and to paint them as villains, which they are. It's an opportunity for class conscious messaging. It's a unifying, um, organizing campaign that creates new class formations across party lines. And you're not asking people to show up in solidarity alone. This is in everyone's direct material interest, which always makes for a more compelling and urgent organizing ask, right? And I think that this is what we have to do with all of our anti-ICE organizing. This campaign offers a clear way to do that, right? Like, this is not about just showing up in solidarity. This is about all of us fighting for our freedom together. Um, so, sorry. And then let me check one thing because I want to make sure I'm not over. Oh, am I over? I think I'm over, guys. Sorry. Um, am I over? Over time? Um, a little bit. Okay, well then yeah, then I can basically end it there. But the last thing I will say is DSA has really had a profound impact on my life because DSA has given me the tools and pulled me into organizing experiences that have allowed me to connect with my own power and accept my share of responsibility for this movement and fight back against the bad people who are destroying the world and hurting our people. So, I would encourage everybody to join DSA. Like, if I could offer you any gift, I can't build relationships with everybody on this call, but if I can offer you a gift, it would be the community and power that's waiting for you in your DSA chapter. So I'll pass it back to the folks, and so sorry for going over.
No, you're all good. You're all good. I think I'm not alone in saying that that was like very, very informative about a topic that I personally don't know a whole lot about. So thank you for talking about that, and thank you to all of our speakers for being so incredible. So just so everyone knows, we are at about 99,000 members in DSA right now. Um, and that is the highest amount of members we've ever had. So we're about to hit 100K, which is huge. Is anyone here not a DSA member? There should be a poll in the chat. Oh, I love the not yet. That's the best. That's the best answer. No offense to all of our incredible DSA members. Yep. Yep. Once we hit 100K, it will make us the largest socialist organization in over a century. And we should absolutely throw a party. Um, yeah. Awesome. If you sign up right now, you have the opportunity to potentially be our 100th member, or not our 100,000th member. I don't know if you guys have seen the video of like Zoran, getting New York City DSA to 10K. I wish I could do that with you guys and like point you all out. But in lieu of that, sign up to be a member, get organizing in your chapters. It really is going to take a movement of, hundreds of thousands of people. And, beyond that, once we, continue to grow, it's only February. But it's good. Yeah, it's going to take a mass movement to stop Trump's fascist regime. We need everybody in this. Tell everyone you know to join, tell your grandma to join. We we're almost there. And from there, I'll pass it off to Megan.
Thanks, Eleanor. Hey everybody. It is really cold here in upstate New York tonight. Um, and I hope everybody's staying warm. We're there. I think it's kind of cold everywhere. Um, So I am on tonight to talk to you about a new thing the DSA is rolling out literally just today. So we, my name is Megan, by the way. I am one of your national co-chairs, which means that I sit on your national political committee, as does Eleanor, as does Ashik, who you saw earlier on the call. He is my co-chair. Um, and we, as the national political committee, passed a new fundraising, a special fund, basically, by which we can support chapters doing specific anti-ICE work. And this fund allows you to donate so that if you're wanting to donate to, DSA chapters doing anti-ICE work on the ground, knowing like we all do that we don't necessarily know where it's going to be needed next, right? ICE is everywhere right now. Where the next surge will be, though, we've heard some things. Maybe it'll be in Maine. Maybe it'll, who knows? New York, possibly. We don't know. But if we have this fund with these sort of this money that is set aside specifically for this work, we can find out where the surge is going to be and direct it that way. We can also let chapters who just don't have as much in the bank apply for grants for anything from whistles, hand warmers, like so cold, hand warmers, food to feed volunteers and ice watch folks, printing know your rights materials, just groceries, bulk groceries, so that they can do grocery deliveries to folks who are afraid to leave their house because ICE might kidnap them off the street. Any of those sort of things that chapters are doing, DSA chapters are doing to take on ICE where they are, and to fight for their community and to fight for socialism. So you can donate to this fund and know that the money will be directed toward this work. And if you are a DSA chapter leader, please keep an eye out, because info will be coming like very, very soon about how you can apply for funds here. But yes, the link is being posted in the chat. We're asking if you are able to donate. That is amazing. If you're able to pop it in your group chats, is anybody else's mom like really freaked out at this moment? My mom is really, really freaked out at this, but that's like part of what makes me feel like this is really a watershed moment. It's hitting the moms. But yeah, put it in the family group chat. Mom, you wanted something to do. Here's something you can do. You'll donate here. It'll get sent to wherever needs it, whoever is doing this work, anywhere that it is happening. So that is my pitch. I'm hoping you will, if you are not already a member, become one. Recruit mom, right? I was just in Pinellas, Florida, where I met Richie Floyd, who is our only DSA elected in the state of Florida. I met his mom, who is a DSA member, which was really fun. So everybody recruit your mom, donate to the Melt Ice Fund, and we'll see you at the next thing.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, it's super exciting that we're getting that money out, directly to chapters where um, they are doing a lot of that direct action. So I'm gonna close this out. Just a reminder, there will be an email that'll go out with a recording and slides. I'll try my best to get it all together by tomorrow, but of course, be patient with me. These are trying times. And yeah, I just have, a few announcements of things that you can do right now to, help fight ICE. Because like we had a lot of really incredible speakers, and I hope it's making you guys feel fired up. So, we really, really need the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, the Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, to do everything that he can to prevent his party from voting for ICE funding. So using the link that Emma should be sharing right now, um, you can use that link to give him a call before February 13th, because that is likely when they will be voting. And then join us this Thursday, February 5th, for a phone bank so we can make sure that Schumer gets thousands of calls. So, if all like if all of you guys call and he gets a couple hundred calls, that's great, but it's going to be super, super important that we also, activate all of the folks that we're going to call Schumer. And there should be a link to that. Oh, yep, the phone bank. Thank you, Emma. Um, and next Monday, February 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, we're going to have a talking to non-socialists about ICE and immigration training. So if there are people in your life who you dread speaking with about these topics and who you wish you could find a way to get through, this training is for you. So there will be a link in the chat for that as well. Couple more things. Twin Cities Comrades are organizing a major action at Target corporate headquarters on Wednesday, February 11th. And they're calling on every DSA chapter with a Target nearby to hold a coordinated action the same day. We're urging chapters to join. More information about that is going to be sent out in the follow-up email. So for now, we've got, the phone bank on February 5th, the talking to non-socialists about ICE on February 9th. And then to close us out on Sunday, February 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 p.m. Pacific, the Trump Admin Response Committee, which is what